I'm super excited, as you can see. I mean, we have this amazing guest on our podcast today. She is someone that really puts together research at the interface of engineering and medicine. Okay, she is interested in developing some very cool therapeutics. Okay, it ranges from treatments for cancer as well as prevention strategies for sexually transmitted infections. You know what? What's even more exciting is that she was recently elected as a fellow as part of the Leadership and Innovation in Academic Medicine program. Her name is Dr. Jill Steinbach-Rankins. She is a professor at the University of Louisville. Please join me in welcoming Jill. Hey, Jill, how's it going?
All right.
It's going very well, you guys. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here for your inaugural podcast and my first time on a podcast as well. So yeah, thank you so much for your kind words and for inviting me.
So tell us, what is your research about right now? What are you trying to work on? What's your team working on? Please just explain it in layman's term for the audience to really kind of enjoy what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much. So our focus in our lab is basically to develop new delivery vehicles to treat things like virus infections or bacterial infections, or to find better treatment approaches for cancer. And, people may wonder what's a delivery vehicle? Why do we care? But if we look at different pathologies like cancer or viruses or even bacterial infections, often in our bodies, as we may know here, there's certain hurdles you have to overcome. Certain drugs can't penetrate into tumors. Maybe different antivirals can't get around mucus or through the bloodstream to be effective in patients. And so part of our expertise, I like to think, merges engineering with medicine to come up with solutions to some of those problems.
Very cool. Very cool.
So were you an engineer first and then moved into the more medical aspect of things when you first started?
Yeah. So I probably have a non-traditional pathway in my career, in that I started way back when more in material science engineering in the area of like electronic materials. So I worked in undergrad and then subsequently in industry and developing computer chips, writing code. So host computers and buses can transport information. So for example, if a motor in an engine in the plane goes down, how do we switch the software communications to keep that going so it can transition to another engine? Or for 911 calls, how do we switch lines and make those lines available? So my early career was focused on the design and development of those semiconductor chips and then coding at a higher level. And I guess at that point I was going back when I joined the industry, they had the opportunity to get your master's degree part-time, and they would pay for it. And I knew to get into research, I would need to get a master's degree. So I went back part-time for my master's, and through that pathway and completing that, I actually switched fields into the area of bioengineering, in which my PhD in.
So you went from dealing with software viruses as a threat to biological viruses.
True. Yeah. I should maybe make a jump back, right? That might be.
Well, no, we want you in that stage, because with the whole COVID thing going on, it's probably the brighter brains in this field, the better.
Yeah, very cool stuff, Jill. I mean, I just learned that, you also worked in industry. So, what made you decide to switch from, industry to academia? Because, that's probably what a lot of our guests are wondering, our members are wondering as well, is, what do we choose? Academia, industry? What made you switch? Was there something kind of just excited your interest more in academia? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. So for me in industry, I sort of through the process of, your early years in industry, switching, getting a promotion and such, switching positions to something that wasn't necessarily my focus. So while I always had a love of, we'll call it from a nerdy side, device physics, where you look at like the chips in your phone, how does an electron move to, produce these screens that we're looking at right now, right? And I got into a position where it was more computer coding heavy. And simultaneous to that, I was finishing up my master's degree in material science. I would say that from a computer coding perspective, at that point in my early 20s, I just didn't perhaps have like feel like the zest of, waking up and doing that for, if you think about a 40-year career, right? So I took a step back, and at the end of my master's degree, the professors on my committee, they asked, hey, would you be interested in a PhD? And I had never thought about it. I kind of came from, like, in my family, you get your bachelor's degree and work really hard and then try to line yourself up for a career path with a reliable engineering income. And so I paused and thought that this may be an opportunity to pursue something else. And I think a lot of people that switch into the biological fields might also say that I wanted technologies that I was developing to have a more direct impact on people's health. So that's not to say like all the work I was doing on computer chips and coding systems that definitely had what I think might eventually be an indirect impact, but to have a more direct impact. So I took them up on their offer and actually looked into what was beginning then into pursuing a PhD in bioengineering.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So, I mean, like you mentioned, you want to have an impact on society, right, with what you're doing. So, one of the biggest challenges for any researcher, whether it's industry or academia, is funding, right? So if you were given all the funding in the world, how would you use this funding, and how will it accelerate research? What do you think?
Maybe she wouldn't pump it into research. She would, buy an island somewhere.
Just go on vacation, right?
That's okay too. You can tell us that too. It's fine.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think I would buy a yacht first,
Think
of bigger, grander ideas and then implement it after, right?
That's right. Yeah. And then the research just comes along with that, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really tough question from a lot of perspectives. So first off, I would just say, when I hear questions like that, I can't help but think of all the things that I'm not involved in. And that's a little bit humbling, right? So I think, first of all, from a personal perspective, if I could do maybe anything outside of this or had limitless money, I had seen on the way back from a conference last year, a movie called Life in the Doghouse. And in that, they show these two gentlemen that basically open their house to I think over 11,000 animals that they saved from euthanasia and all of this. And so I found that really, really humbling in terms of what we might complain about on an everyday basis and
right.
what we'd like to support. But of course that, that's a little different than, I guess, research funding. And there's so many initiatives. That did ask me, though, that prompts the question, though, if you had all the time in the world in parallel with money, like what might you do with all the time that you had? From a field-specific point of view, I think that's a really hard question. I mean, there's a lot of agencies like the Gates Foundation. They're doing a great job in different subsectors to answer questions like agriculture, funding, education. And so I think from a field specific point of view, what might be most important is finding the source of a solution, if you will. So how can we educate enough people to solve all of the problems that we're going to have? Because with limitless funding, I tend to think we may be able to prolong somebody's lifespan a little bit. But then we have other problems like utilizing more resources to, adapt to that new solution. So I think if I were to pour money into an initiative, I really think global education, domestic and global education are huge initiatives to equip people with the right skill sets to address all of the problems we have to begin with. And I think it's really hard too, thinking about like initiatives, addressing like in an engineering 101 class I teach, thinking about how you might use different solutions to solve homelessness and questions such as that. But then going beyond that, and how can we get people to contribute and society to kind of evolve? If you're putting money into something, how do you get that? I don't mean like return on investment in terms of money, but in terms of solutions to help people live and for the expanding problems we have now. And not to be pessimistic, but they continue on. Yeah.
No, I mean, there's a lot of social cultural factors as well that play a role, right? I mean, whatever works for us here in North America may not work for individuals in other countries or other continents as well, right? So I mean, like you said, there's a lot of different factors we need to kind of take into consideration before we actually have a very well effective therapeutic that can help people globally, right? So I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of different things that kind of come into play when you develop something.
Yeah, you're much more noble than I am. I probably would have gone on a lavish vacation, but
and I would join you.
I guess I'll join you. I'll join both of you. Yeah.
Come on.
No, but I think, Emmanuel, it's a really good point. Looking at some of the technologies that I've seen funded by Gates, for example, when you look at I guess I'm a multi-purpose person, and when you look at technologies like people putting antivirals in fruits or vegetables and all these things, and then you see what some of the challenges we're having, as a society with the pandemic and vaccines, and so some of these big questions, right? That by sometimes combining multi-purpose technologies sound great, but then what if somebody doesn't want to eat those foods because they have something that they're afraid of taking, much like we've probably seen in the viral sexually transmitted infection realm, right? It's like learning that as well.
Yeah. How closely, speak of the pandemic, how closely are you following what's going on in terms of vaccine development or research? Are you in tune to that, and are you kind of trying to relate it to your work that you're doing at all, or?
Yeah. So, well, thanks for asking. Here, so I've been, broadly following what's going on with the vaccines. I would say it's hit in particularly hard here. So I work, the floor that I work on happens to be broadly, I'm the only engineer, and then there's mainly microbiologists, virologists on this floor. So we were the floor that, not me personally, but that people came to for testing when Kentucky needed it. And so at first, I think we were the first, kind of like the first responders in developing, my colleagues working all hours, developing high throughput testing, and then building those capabilities to then test with different active agents. So while I personally, we have some projects I envision on the horizon based on the outcomes of some of those studies, but
right.
I mean, just watching my colleagues devote, sleepless nights to those initiatives to make sure that people are tested and all of that. And of course, now there's other testing mechanisms available. But yeah, it's been really striking from that perspective.
Yeah.
So how has COVID impacted your research? Have you found that's kind of a little bit more difficult to continue research right now because of COVID?
Yeah, and I mean, I think probably a lot of researchers globally feel the same, right? We had, as you might even be familiar with, we had the labs shut down since early March and have just begun the process of phases of reopening to ensure everybody's safe. And, right now, just trained personnel, students aren't really here yet, but yeah, so staged phases of reopening to start that again.
Yeah,
it's hit a lot of lab suppliers, scientific lab suppliers industry is pretty hard. I mean, essentially, a good chunk of their business in terms of universities and research labs at hospitals have been shut down for months, and now slowly they're starting to reopen.
Yeah, and meanwhile, you see sort of the other side of it, where some industries are really booming, for lack of a better word, in terms of like the supplies needed to make things.
Testing.
And keep reagents on the shelf, and then there's which makes sense. I hadn't thought of the other side of things.
Yeah, it really makes us think of different ways to kind of, I guess, adapt to situations such as COVID. I mean, COVID-19 is probably the first of, unfortunately, many more other types of COVID or other infectious diseases that we may encounter in our lives, right? So I could definitely see, every sector is learning to adapt, right? A lot of people have accustomed themselves to working from home, right? And now they're second guessing themselves, like, well, do we really need office space anymore, right? And so forth. So, I mean, I could definitely see the research landscape also adapting. We definitely need to learn and adapt and pivot when necessary. So, yeah, this is very, very interesting. I think, even implementing some sort of technology aspect to our research program will help as well, right, moving forward. So.
Yeah. So how are you guys? How has it been? I mean, Emmanuel, from your lab's perspective, and Pat from the industry perspective, beyond what you shared, like how has it? What are you involved in, and how has it impacted you?
Yeah, it's been a challenge as well. We've all been shut down since March. My research team has just reopened up pretty much last week. So we're slowly transitioning. Everything is kind of done with restrictions, right? Set hours, increased precautions, and so forth. Still practicing physical distancing while in the research labs and whatnot. So it has been a challenge. I would say the biggest challenge is the impact on mental health of my team members. Right, I think that's the most important. Especially for those that are hoping to graduate end of year. That there's a bit of that mental stress where am I going to be able to graduate on time? Am I able to get the data I need and so forth? So I think as professors, right, PIs, we need to just do our best to reassure them that everything will be fine. I think everyone's in the same boat, so we all understand. And really, at the end of the day, is just do what you can, and that's it. Don't overstress yourself. Don't get too anxious and whatnot. So I'm more worried about my members.
I think that mental aspect is definitely overlooked, right? I mean, in terms of the industry, like I was saying earlier, a lot of, especially if you're selling consumables, a good chunk of your business, anywhere between 40 to 70% of your business is at the university level. So a lot of, in a way, it's allowed some innovation and creativity. A lot of people, companies in the industry have had to pivot their business. And so that's really cool to see as well. And sort of reinvent themselves, reinvent their jobs, reimagining how it is to work from home and to collaborate. So that's the good part of it. But I think a lot of people, if you're not directly involved in supplying tests or, buffers or antibodies involved in those tests, you just can't wait for universities to start opening up again to full capacity, which who knows at this point. I mean, I know in some pockets of the US, I mean, it's looking pretty dire right now. So
yeah,
it's not even a second wave. It's just the first wave that hasn't ended, so.
You did some of your training, I believe, at the University of Illinois, correct? Have you noticed that the research landscape has also changed since you were a graduate student till now?
Sure. And so again, I think it's probably been an interesting pathway for me, and that I can see it in a couple different fields. So back at U of I is where I did a lot of the work on semiconductor technology and the chips, and I think computer chips. And as expected, I think we've seen that. Well, I don't focus on that anymore. We've seen devices speed up, right? Get smaller, faster, as promised. Quantum computing is up and coming. I think it's really, really interesting. All the AI applications from a coding realm, so that that field has definitely advanced, and I would say that field is also providing a platform in terms of a lot of even like from an additive manufacturing or other perspectives that you can use these bigger circuitries for. But then moving on, when I shifted gears and thinking about when I first started, I was really interested in for my PhD project, how can you come up with a better treatment for glioblastoma or brain cancer? And it's such a bad, such a morbid pathology, in that usually it's people like under 40 who have a 9 to 12 month lifespan. And so I was really intrigued with how brain cancer is so invasive, right? And it to think about that, it's usually just a couple cells crossing hemispheres that can actually, and this highlights some of the problems we address, that those cells, individual cells that they can't even detect, move faster than you can actually get treatment, administer treatment, that the treatment diffuses through the brain tissue. So I mean, pretty interesting, but I think that also, is our research sort of evolves with needs, if you will. So then we focused on viruses and microbial infections most recently. But I think what we find is that a lot of the concepts governing, for example, how do you get a drug to the place where it's needed? How can we better deliver things more comfortably, more easily, conveniently to patients? I think there's a lot of, whether it's active agents that we're looking to repurpose, or concepts, like overall concepts of transport that just seem to have been hashed out so well so many years ago. So I think there's a lot of interesting technologies, but we're building upon a really solid foundation of the past, right? So it's more, it feels sometimes to me a little bit incremental, that it's almost hard in the drug delivery realm to come up with something earth-shattering and, in making nanoparticles that people haven't thought of before. But I think, what I do think is really neat is some of the initiatives where determining like the underpinnings of how, whether it's cancer or virus transmission and infection, or even now microbial infection, the tools that people have developed, going back from like the Brain Atlas during my PhD, that was the Brain Genome Project, right? Developing that, to now how we use proteomics or metabolomics or microbiome, like how can you look at little bacteria and how that affect everything. I think we have a lot more tools to mechanistically understand what's going on, so it might be less of a brute force treatment approach in the future, and maybe we can use some of that information, as they would say, to better personalize treatment by understanding better what's going on. So I don't know, sometimes I think yeah, in drug delivery, some incremental improvements are still being made, but it's going to require a better understanding in all of these fields about what's going on for specific diseases, to incorporate that into how we translate our science into something that's effective.
Very cool. I think you just have such an interesting perspective on the whole thing, especially with your engineering background, and it really shows. That's great. I think, have you ever, is this always kind of in the back of your mind, taking your idea and your innovation in the lab and commercializing it for the masses? If so, what's your vision in that, and the steps taken to reach that goal?
Yeah. So we're involved in a lot of that. You submit what are called, and maybe it differs according to where you are, but you submit like research disclosures that can result in patent applications, and we're fortunate to have a few of those in process. I will say, nice. I think I should say, nothing tangible yet, but I think one of the there's many big challenges, right? But I think one of the biggest challenges is sometimes, like maybe we received bad news earlier this week on one of our antiviral patents, that somebody had this really broad claim of all 30 different antivirals and 30 different polymer, really broad claims that was filed since our 2014. And so you've run into these.
Oh, really?
Where people have such broad claims, it can be difficult to overcome, I think.
Yeah.
But, I think on the bright side, you can often evolve that with new material, and in which we are, we're constantly, I think something came my way today, and we're constantly working on trying to get our technology out there. Mm-hmm. But I do think it is a challenge, and patents I just have a lot of very high regard for people that have them, and how they must have gone through the years-long process to actually achieve that innovation.
Yeah. One of my best friends is a really good patent lawyer, so we can maybe help you out there. Let me know.
People don't really realize, something came back from 2014 literally this week, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's from 6 years ago, and so much has been done since.
Yeah.
From the time of doing lab-based research all the way to actually getting a product approved, that's a long time, right? That's a very long time. I've talked to others, depending on what you're trying to approve, it may take sometimes 10 years, for example. Now, with the whole COVID situation, we're trying to get a vaccine within a year. It makes you wonder. It's like, wow, are we able to accelerate a 10-year process into a single year, ensuring the most important is safety and efficacy, right? So it makes you wonder that, what kind of process that we really need to, uphold ourselves as scientists, right? We got to make sure that we're doing all the right checks, all the right experiments, having the right controls, right? So it is an interesting time right now with COVID, just to see how things go, right? If we can get some sort of treatment or even a vaccine within a year, that'd be excellent, right?
Yeah.
And now I think there's more research involved. So I'm not sure if you've heard this too, Jill, but now apparently if you're infected with COVID, it depends on the amount of neutralizing antibodies you have, but you may only be immune for 3 months. So, there goes the theory of herd immunity right there, right? So, it's really important to understand the efficacy. So like, when the dosage and when if you give a booster shot, when is that going to take place and all that, right? It's still all up in the air right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think really for the immunologists, understanding that exactly that duration of protection, which if we don't spend enough time testing some of the things, I mean, at least you could make short-term claims, but I mean, and then looking, I mean, when we see like that, not to get on that like hydroxychloroquine and all of that, like seeing globally some of the impacts of rushing things too quickly just to get an answer and try, not, as Emmanuel alluded to, a lack of well-organized studies or control groups, dosing, all these things that need to be thought out of that have just kind of exploded and actually have caused, it seems, in some countries, like more than just scientific hazards, right? There's a lot of political, governmental, other dangerous issues going on with accelerated tests. So, yeah,
and it doesn't say, yeah, correct. Sorry to interrupt. It doesn't mean like, the first company to come out with a vaccine, it doesn't mean that's going to be the best vaccine. No. And would you trust it? Like if a vaccine were available tomorrow, would you take it? Would you trust it? And all that. So.
Yeah. What worries me the most is mutations, right? I mean, we don't even have a vaccine for the common cold, right? It's also coronavirus, right? So I mean, stuff like that kind of makes you wonder. It's like, wow, these viruses, they're very interesting, microorganisms, right? They highly evolved. They know how to adapt, right? So whatever we come up with now may not be effective next year, right?
So what have been the challenges, Jill, that you faced in your research? I mean, I'm sure there are tons of them, but like sort of the main challenge, it could be for anything, like, finding the right students to, scientific challenges. Anything you can share?
Yeah, I think maybe just to say I'll say for like one aspect for people maybe starting off in one's career, right? Like just determining your path, whether that's like for me, starting a lab was I think it's underestimated how challenging that can be. And nobody really tells you these things. And so I think there's just different points in one's career, maybe realizing, for me, or maybe for others in industry or another pathway, really asking yourself, like, if you have the opportunity to enjoy what you do, to ask yourself, do I enjoy what I do? Am I passionate about this? I think those were each respectively their challenge. The latter, figuring that out early on in my career, you still worry, like, oh my, in your mid to late 20s, like, oh, is it too late to switch paths? So
right.
That's, maybe that's a challenge. And starting one's own lab definitely was a challenge, kind of going from purely science and kind of managing your own project to now having the vision for the lab. A lot of projects, like getting the right people, like a team that really gels well together, and that all of you want to work together and overcome, right? Because I tell like students and people I work with in science, and I don't know if this ratio has changed. I used to think it was like 95% of what you hear is either constructive criticism or like bad news, right? Or experiments don't work all the time. And so you have to be, I think, pretty logical, analytical, yet positive. I don't know how one would get by if you weren't optimistic and positive, but yet resilient to all of that. So I think, those are some, I think that's really important. And I would also mention like a shout out on the side here, that collaborations too, like looking for good collaborator mentors. I myself, even, at this kind of middle stage of my career, I still find it still can be intimidating to reach out and maybe somebody you admire or somebody in the field, that it's still intimidating. So I can only imagine for more junior people how that might be. But it's really important to have mentors, and maybe even like for me, good mentors came as collaborators, and so I'm incredibly grateful to them for kind of opening my eyes to how we might apply some of the things I'm doing to investigating new questions. And so I don't know, maybe, I guess, sorry, that's like probably the handful of components that I think have been challenging, but have each worked their way out.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's amazing advice that you just given, I think, to a lot of up and coming, individuals that want to be scientists like yourself. I mean, like you said, having mentors, excellent mentors is very important in anyone's career, I think. Even till now, I would always turn to my mentors for advice. I would always turn to them for some support. And I think a lot of students nowadays they're always afraid to talk to their mentors, talk to their supervisors, because they feel like they can't really, connect with them at that level. But what they don't realize is we want to help, right? I think as advisors, as mentors, we want to guide and help. So I mean, I think that was excellent advice that you just gave. If what people see right now with you is they see you as a successful scientist, right? A professor. You got the dream job of your life, right? Being the supervisor of an independent research lab. Now, has there ever been a time in your career where you found that it was a low point per se, that kind of said, hey, you know what, maybe this is not it. Maybe academia is not the life that I want anymore. And how did you get around that? Was there any?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe if we take the academia part of it, because in industry, I was fortunate to align with another career path and kind of start over, if you will, in that. Yeah, in academia, I mean, I think a couple things. I think learning, embarrassingly, right, but we all go through it, like learning how to write, going into a postdoc position and realizing, wow, like I still have some proficiency issues in technically writing. So, yeah, I guess that's like a vulnerable thing one says here, but I think a lot of people might struggle with that at the end of their PhD or beginning a postdoc, where they're really venturing out on their own as an independent scientist. So that's critical, and it was always my mentor, Dr. Saltzman, he always told me how critical that would be. And I didn't fully understand it at the time. And I understand now because we write everything. But I think another big point for me was it might have been probably 2 points during my academic career, about a year and a half in, maybe some challenges getting the right fit, like right talent in the lab to help grow the lab. And then maybe, and that's a big thing too, right? Like making sure everybody like can get along and like has a common vision for the work. And then probably a few years in, like it mid tenure for me, I more say this because if there's other like young faculty or postdocs watching, nobody ever talks about this, and you can just feel kind of bad sometimes. Like I felt like I was working as much as I could, and we had all these publications in the pipeline, but I think my mid-tenure review is about 2 years, like 7 months in. So 2 years, 6 months in, and I hadn't achieved big funding either. And yet we were writing so many grant applications, and I just felt like there was so much effort, and I knew I was doing the best that this is as well as I can do. And, I guess I had to take a step back then and just tell myself mentally that if things didn't come through, and if I couldn't be successful, that's okay, that I have been malleable and changed courses before. And then sure enough, I literally, no joke, like one day after, kind of after suggestions to help my career, like, hey, you need to get funding, or you need to, like, I got a couple grants, and then the publications came out. And so I think with anything, and I can see this from in industry, graduate school, all these perspectives, if you're putting in the hard work for a year or two, and this is something I share with my students, whatever you're doing right now is what you'll have to show for it in research world is like a year and a half or 2 years down the road. And it will come if you work really hard, but it's just hard to see that sometimes in the moment if you're getting rejections and great constructive criticism, but sometimes it doesn't, it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you made an excellent point. I mean, a lot of people don't see all the rejections that that you've received, right? Either in terms of grants being rejected or manuscripts being rejected. What they really see is just all the successes, right? It's always easy to show success, but they don't realize, you need a lot of perseverance, right? You need to put in a lot of blood and sweat, really, literally. All right, into the career. But I mean, this speaks to all jobs, right? Not just academia, but any job, whether in industry, right, sales, and whatnot. If you want to be successful in any opportunity that you're given, you got to put in the time and effort, right? So I think
and that's where I think
great advice.
Yeah, that's where I think the passion comes in too, right? If you didn't, I think your drive and that sense of purpose, right? It's during the hard times that you need those that'll take you through it, right? And if you didn't have that passion, that drive, Jill, yeah, we probably wouldn't have this podcast with you right now.
You guys are too kind, but like, I mean, I think it does come to that, like that. I just like to think of it as like optimism. You know, sometimes people come in and, you know, you're just chatting with a student and being optimistic, and they don't know that like late the last night, when like, the night before, you know, you got like the worst rejection, like, you know, 10 pages, you know, so these things happen. And I think, the big thing is just, are you like, I also tell students this, like, I'm so fortunate to be where I am. Like every day I think about all the other people that could be in my position. So I must say that really drives me, because I didn't realize that. And I know it's like that in a lot of fields, and in academia as well, where I didn't realize like maybe how sought after a position is, or how many applicants there are. And so you just feel like you feel grateful. I mean, I feel grateful every day, and then you just want to do your best at like, I don't know, like my sign here, like be awesome today, like, and not even cliche, just like be the best you can be in every situation with people, with your students that are like looking up to you, you know, or maybe not, but you know.
I like that sign, Jill. So
as a leader,
are you feeling awesome today? Are you feeling awesome today?
I'm doing my best.
You are being awesome today. You are. We can feel it.
Pat, I think you and we need that sign in our office as well.
I definitely need it tattooed. I don't need a sign. I need it tattooed right here.
on your forehead. Face tattoo right now, Pat. So feel free to get one.
We'll be looking at each other with it. Yeah.
We'll remind each other. Every time we see each other, it says, Pat, you are awesome.
I'll think about it.
I mean, so Jill, I believe, are you looking for any new trainees? So for any audience member that's listening in right now, that they're interested to learn more about your research, or even maybe join your research team, you know, do you have any openings right now? Let them know.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, so we are always on the lookout. I've been so fortunate to have graduated 2 PhD students last year, and now I'll have my first female graduate student or PhD student graduating in October. So, and the 2 master's students leave the group. So, yeah, I would be thrilled to take on, you know, anybody that is really passionate and interested in, like, you know, microbiology, bioengineering, pharmaceutics, pharmacology. Yeah, so always looking for really just like engaged, smart, passionate graduate students. And we're also hiring, I think this Friday our posting goes out, so for a research technologist in the group. And yeah, so always looking for good people to join the team. And I mean, they can feel free to like send me a note, or they could
find you at the University of Louisville's biomedical engineering department's website, right? So anyone that's interested in joining Jill's group, I definitely say reach out to her and search her up online, and you'll find her.
Yeah, we'll put your email and the link to your website on our YouTube post
channel as well. Yeah,
comments or whatever you call it.
But I mean, you know, you've done a lot of amazing stuff. You know, I'm really impressed with that. The most recent leadership and innovation in academic medicine fellowship. I mean, that is very cool. I mean, you are basically the only engineer in the past 4 years of program that's been accepted as a fellow into this program. Tell us a little bit about that. You know, how do you think they came to the decision to accept an engineer and not a medical student, for example? What was it about your resume that kind of got you into this elite group of individuals?
Emmanuel, you're too much. You're really too much. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for mentioning it. There's a couple. I'm really excited because for me, how to say, I do love the science, and have loved science and math my whole life. But I think there's another part of me that's always liked psychology, like working with people. Like I love that probably as much, if not even more than, which is a little crazy to say, this being a casual science and not like casual, like working with people podcast, right? But yeah, I'm pretty passionate about that. And so there were like a couple initiatives in like the LIAM program I had noticed like a couple colleagues of mine have graduated from this program in the past, and in terms of, you know, growing in leadership thinking, I always wonder, you know, well, I think we, hopefully many of us can candidly assess our strengths and weaknesses, and I have an idea of what some of mine are, but this program supposedly like helps you look at first yourself, you know, what are the strengths and weaknesses of yourself, how can you work with others to develop theirs, and then kind of looking at from like people working for you to people working with you, like colleagues and across an organization. And so I'm really excited about that, actually, because I think it kind of, it actually brings me back to undergrad when while I was in engineering classes all day, I was like 2 classes away from a minor in psychology. And I always so I would have a class a day in psychology because I was always fascinated at how people interact with each other and converse and just a rationale behind people's actions. So anyway, I'm really excited. It seems like, you know, fast forward 20 plus years here, it might be another opportunity to make myself a better person to work with, learn how to lead colleagues, right? That seems like an intimidating thing, like leading a group is one thing, but so yeah, so that's a really exciting thing. And then in engineering themselves, they were kind enough to nominate me for this bluegrass leadership, which I think we will present our project for that. And that's like, all these are like school wide, but as the engineer in the group, we'll present our work in this Kentucky Leadership Initiative, where I think you learn more about what different pathways might be from the administrative side of things, which I've never really like considered more of the academic learning side of things. So yeah, I feel really honored. You never know if it's the right time for these things, but yeah, I feel really honored to represent engineering in these, and yeah, looking forward to that.
Hey, you deserve it.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, from knowing you,
amazing.
I mean, you have an amazing CV. You know, you're funded by the National Institutes of Health, right? You got a great
Nice.
research team. We're doing some exciting research. So it's very well deserved to be part of this amazing group of fellows. Congratulations, Jill.
You guys are too kind.
Definitely.
I mean, this is coming from you too. Yeah, with your own accolades, which somebody has to do a podcast on the two of you, really. Yeah. I highlight all of this. I think you need to have, if you
camera,
like a role reversal, just let me know.
Sounds great. Maybe after a couple of drinks, we'll reverse the roles and
I'll do anything after a couple of drinks.
Yeah, we'll just be talking about anything. Probably won't be talking about science, but
I see. So, yeah, it's not like I have like a sparkling water here. Yeah, so I don't know that it's fair. Yeah, the fair switcheroo, but yeah.
You don't know what I have in here, and I'll keep it that way.
So being in Kentucky, then bourbon is big, right? Bourbon is big. So are you into bourbon? You know, tell us a little bit. Because I would love to visit Kentucky just for the bourbon and fried chicken.
Well, yeah, I mean, the bourbon is something, and crazily enough, I don't know if you knew this, but the year before accepting a faculty position here, a year before, like Ken and I came down and we ended up doing the Bourbon Trail for 4 days. If I knew that we would live here, I might have put that off. But yeah, I mean, bourbon's a big thing, and I must say, from a personal note, every summer. So 2 summers ago, for instance, I was fortunate because a conference took us to Hawaii. And so that was summer of perfecting the Mai Tai. Yeah. And this summer is summer of the Boulevardier. So it's a Negroni bourbon alternative. And so we're doing like a little design of experiments, or DOE. I was given as a gift. Ken gave me this book called Liquid Intelligence. I don't know if you've heard of it. Have you heard of it?
I have not heard of it, no, but it sounds interesting.
I've read the book Liquid Unintelligence for sure. I know a little too well about that one.
My version of the book was Liquid for Dummies.
Well, okay, so you guys I think you'd love it. It's a cocktail manual on somebody basically going through, you know, everything from changing the temperature of liqueurs to the amount of stirring to the size of the cubes to, at the end, they actually employ centrifuges and rotovapes and such to make these.
What?
Yeah, like really artsy and really. thing. Yeah, what did I get to? Like page 20, where they have the Negroni, and that's it, and variations thereof. In the summer, the summer halted. And
hey, mixing drinks is an art and a science in its own right. So I mean,
yes.
Bravo that you're able to mix that together.
So actually, Emmanuel was telling me that I think you're getting ready to your next career of like knife throwing or something like that. You want to?
Oh, another hobby. Yes. I didn't want to spoil it, so please. I thought it was very interesting. Okay, but
I need to
about this other hobby.
I need to hear about this.
So yeah, I mean, I probably should have brought this up when you guys asked if there were any moments I wanted to get out of academia. That would have been the appropriate place to say I know where I'm going next. But yeah, I was really fortunate during my postdoc. I moved out to Connecticut, right? Didn't know anybody, and I just thought, like, what would I do? Like, what kind of hobby might I be able to learn a new skill? And so I joined the Guilford Art Center there, and they had what do you call it? Like a pocket knife making class, a weekend class. So you go for a Saturday, Sunday, and they teach you how to basically take like something like it looks like this pen, and you forge it out and do all the steps to produce a functional, like kind of pocket knife, hunting knife, I guess. And so yeah, I loved it so much. It was, I mean, we have basically the master apprentice there. He ended up going on to the Forged in Fire. He won a Forged in Fire episode years later. But yeah, for about 3.5 years, I went to an open forge session for, when the weather wasn't too bad because you're in a shed. I went there like after work once a week for 3 hours, and just over the course of 3.5 years, made like, I want to say like eight different knives and a tomahawk too. So it's pretty and it's remarkable, right? You have stainless steel rods or things that look like rulers, and you pound them out into something aesthetically beautiful and functional and great. It taught me to slow down and to have attention to detail too. So actually one of the, I don't want to disrespectfully refer to him, but the person in charge of making all of Rambo's weapons, like forging them. He lives, I want to say like, I'll say 30 minutes from me, but to take one of his classes is so.
That would be.
Oh, wow.
Thousands of dollars.
Really, eh?
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he can actually teach you how to make the actual Rambo knife.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's worth it. That's worth it.
Like
teeth and everything. Oh man. Oh
sure.
Wow.
Yeah,
He also as a recruitment process, you should either, tell your prospective students, put an apple on top of their head and you throw one of your knives. I don't know. You gotta incorporate that into the hiring process.
See if they have the stomach for it.
Yeah. or even show them your collection of knives and tell them to select which one they think is the tomahawk, which one's the bowl. Right?
Oh my gosh. I was going to say we'd end up with a lot of injured students. I'd probably get a lot of trouble. Yeah. I don't even want to know what would happen if I started throwing things, but
hey, I was actually thinking of taking my team to an axe throwing outing. They offer that here in Kitchener-Waterloo. So I've been
getting popular now.
That once COVID kind of settles down, I'm going to take my team there, and I think it'll be fun. But definitely, I'm going to make them sign some form, not to sue me if they get injured,
or not to throw it at you, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No excuses to throw at me. Exactly.
Actually, they'll do really well if you have a cutout of yourself and you put it there. They'll do really well.
Oh, trust me, they're going to hit me every part of my body.
They'll be pretty accurate, I'm sure.
I like to think that my trainees they love me to death, right? But no until you ask them.
No doubt.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. I mean, you've been an amazing guest. Very exciting research that you've been working on. And again, to the audience, right? Anyone that's interested in the type of research that Jill is working on, feel free to send her an email. I know for sure that she'd be glad to talk to you more about her research interests. She's very enthusiastic, as you can see, with just through the podcast. And definitely, if you want more details, she can explain it a little bit more in depth, more scientific.
So the way I see it, we still have two more podcasts with you coming up. So there's a Bourbon podcast and there's the knife throwing. I should say knife making podcast.
The throwing would be podcast number 3.
Yeah. None of the Bourbon and knife knife making mixed together. It's good. Yeah, good to keep them separate.
Keep them separate, yeah.
But thank you so much, Jill.
Oh, thank you so much.
Hopefully things get back to normal or somewhat normal for you personally, as well as in the research lab.
Get back in the lab.
But yeah, we'll definitely keep in touch and hopefully enjoy the rest of the summer.
You guys too. Yeah, and thanks again. It's such an honor for you guys to have me. You guys are too much. And yeah, congratulations on your first podcast. Like, phenomenal job. And I can't wait to watch more days.
Thanks for making it happen. Thanks. Good luck.
Thank you guys.